Hey, welcome to Real Estate Investors Roundtable, where we have real investors that are active in the market right now today. This is exactly the type of unfiltered content that I wish I had available to me when I got started over 20 years ago. I'm your host, Rob the House Guy, and today we've got a couple awesome guests with us. We have Sam Livingston, which is a longtime real estate agent that's completed over 700 transactions in the past 14 years. Welcome, Sam.
How you doing?
And we have longtime friend of mine, Scott Doringer. I've been doing business with this guy for over 20 years.
Yep.
And is an investor that is not a licensed agent. So for all you folks that have always wanted to get into real estate and you're thinking, can I be an investor and an agent? Should I get my license? We're going to get all those questions answered for you today. So welcome, guys.
How you doing, Rob?
Hey, so let's start with you, Scott. You've been doing this forever. Have you ever thought about getting a real estate license?
I have thought about getting a license, and then just decided just didn't need it. We were making enough money, we were doing enough deals that there was no competitive advantage for us, so we decided not to do it.
Just decided not to do it whatsoever. Did you feel that it would have hindered you in any way to have a license?
You know, we do a lot of different kinds of deals. You know, as you know, we buy, fix, we rehab, we do owner financing, we do rent-to-owns, sandwich rent-to-owns, and all those kind of things. And those are not the typical, realtor things, and we just didn't want Big Brother, watching over our shoulder, telling us what we could and couldn't do.
So, Sam, I know that you are an agent. Do you also dabble in any investing, or are you primarily just an agent?
Well, now I'm just an agent. I actually got into real estate because I had I was flipping houses, and I didn't like that type of realtor that I was working with. So that's how I got started, and I realized I like the real estate, the representation aspect a lot better.
All right, let's dive into that in a minute. You said you didn't like the type of realtor that you were working with.
Correct.
Without using names, let's define that type of realtor.
Okay, so this was obviously pre-crash, pre-market change. So in my experience then, which was very little with real estate agents, I bought my first house for sale by owner, did all the negotiation myself. But then I started purchasing homes. And the type of agent I was working with then were primarily REO agents. So they represented banks and pretty much banks alone. The traditional agent would turn their nose up at REO properties. They don't do those. Short sales, no. So there was typically you had to go to an agent that knew those things. Those agents also didn't do things that a traditional agent would. They weren't very caring of the client. I can't tell you how many homes I got into by myself because the real estate agent wouldn't leave their office and they would just give me the code. And at the end I said, why is this person? I would see the Alta settlement statement at the end and I'd say this agent had made how much money off of this deal, and because I always went in unrepresented, so they got both sides. So I said, well, I'm going to get my license and then I'll be able to do what I'm already doing and earn my commission.
Yeah, I think you saw the money for nothing aspect down there. You're thinking, I'm doing all the work and you're collecting the checks.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that definitely makes sense on that. Do you feel that when you're dealing with agents, because you're not an agent, so sometimes, especially dealing with the REO aspect, that being forced to negotiate with a middleman slows you down a little bit?
See, for me, I love realtors for the exact opposite reason he didn't, because they do give you the code. And because then you don't have to schedule, you're not working around anybody else's schedule. And they don't make enough money as it is, in my opinion, doing these REOs, that I want them making both sides. So we like, networking with the agents who are doing these REO stuff because they just don't make enough, in my opinion.
Right, that makes sense. I find that when dealing with REOs, you do get a much more relaxed agent that's not. They're obviously baking cookies in the vacant house to make it smell good. We'll at least stop and have a pause moment and explain what an REO is to the people that are watching here. REO is real estate owned, and that means that a bank has taken this property back. It went to share sale, did not sell, and then they ended up taking it back. Clearly, both of you know this already, but still just tell everyone here so we're on the same page. So when you're dealing with these houses that are not bank owned, do you feel that, well, you're not an investor anymore, you're strictly a real estate agent, so now I'm going to go back to ask you, so when you're not buying a bank owned, you're buying just from Bob and Betty homeowner, and you have that layer of insulation where you can't find their pain points and talk to them, how do you deal with that?
We don't get very many deals that way because of exactly what you had said. We can't sit down there, we can't feel what they're feeling, and we can't understand what solution they need. And when we can't solve a problem, there's no reason for us to be involved. And when there's a third-party agent who's not investor, experienced, they just don't have that mindset of, how do I make a deal out of this? How do I hear what they're saying, create a package that an investor wants to do it, and communicate it to both parties? That's pretty rare. Usually when an agent's like that, they're not an agent anymore, they're an investor.
Exactly. I know you're probably not like this. You seem like a very cool agent I would feel very comfortable for you negotiating on my other end. But I get some of the part-time agents at home, and I'm not gonna classify them down any further, but where they have no real estate experience other than taking the class and passing the test, and they're clearly misadvising their clients on what's going on, because I'll look at the house, I know how much it's really worth, I know how much it's going to take to do it, I know I'm giving a fair offer, I'm not trying to steal the thing, and they're coming back and I know they're telling their clients they've blown smoke that, oh no, that you can get the full $100,000 for this. How do you deal with those type of agents when you're representing someone like us and you have the part-timer out there that's the weekend warrior as an agent?
A lot of times what's good is the market really dictates what is going to happen. And if you're savvy and understand the market, then a lot of times I don't even deal with those agents. I know they're out there, but really they don't come across my radar that often because I do my research. I have worked with some investors. It's not my niche. I try not to. I shouldn't say I try not to, but it's just not what I attract. So in the event that I am working with someone like that, the properties that those agents would be representing probably aren't in my wheelhouse anyway, because they're overpriced for an investor. Investors are pretty savvy. Typically they'll go to an agent that knows what they're doing if they're going to have their own representation. I understand, Scott, that you like to go to the listing agent directly.
Yeah.
So if the house is way overpriced, it's probably not something that you're dealing with immediately anyway. In the event that I am dealing with an agent and it's a house that someone really wants and the smoke has been blown, as you say, we have to deal with that in a very straightforward, honest manner. I'll send comps, and I try to do it in a way. It can be insulting to an agent to tell them that they're not doing their job properly. So I try not to do that. I try to just say, you provide an education, and then they get to make the decisions. And that's the biggest thing is I don't get to make any decisions.
I've always tried to find that if I'm dealing with someone that's a lot of time inherited a house, that's always the one. They've inherited the house. They're cutting the grass, trying to take care of it. The agent's there. I've always positioned where I'm like, hey, I understand from Ohio law that I can be present when making that offer, so I can be there with you. I've never had success with the agent allowing me to tag along. Have you ever had an experience where you want the buyer? Will you allow them to be present while making an offer?
Well, again, I really like to approach things from a educational standpoint. Say, hey, here's what we can do. These are the options. This is likely to happen. I would discourage any buyer from coming with me. Even a savvy, if they want my involvement, I want to have the reins to be able to go and negotiate in their best interest. Typically, putting buyers and sellers in the same room before you have a deal pinned. I know that there's great stories out there that it's gone great, but typically it doesn't bode well for the deal.
Right.
One of the ways we've been starting to work with realtors in that regard of when they have a house that they've overvalued is we say, hey, we can give you a cash offer, but if they're willing to take monthly payments for a period of time, we can get them paid more. So we go to a multiple offer strategy, and the way we're connecting with realtors is we're saying, hey, do you have any houses that aren't moving or that you're not getting the traffic in the door that they might need another solution at this time, as opposed to just dropping price? Because realtors, when things don't go right, generally speaking, it's, we got to drop the price. The market's speaking to us. It's not their marketing. It's not their sales network. It's we got to drop the price. So we go in there and say, okay, you don't necessarily have to drop your price. How about introducing another solution? And so we're starting to push that out there with realtors. And the ones that are will take time to listen, they're open to that. They don't have another choice.
Now, for the folks that are watching, let's break down the different types of agents they can become. Let's first of all break down the difference between an agent and a broker. And then if you are going to be an agent, it's kind of like specializing in medicine. Saying I want to be a doctor is not really enough. What type of doctor you want to be?
Right.
So let's break it down and tell them, what's the difference between an agent and a broker?
Well, the broker is who holds your license. You're working really for the broker. Everything that I sign I am an agent. I am not a broker. I qualify to take a broker's test, and If I do that, that means things have changed dramatically. But for me, I'm operating on the broker's license, so everything I do, the broker's responsible for. He's responsible for my actions on the behalf of his license. So he sets some rules and some parameters, and as long as I work within them, I have a lot of free reign. As an agent, I am negotiating in the client's best interest on the behalf of the broker.
Okay, so now that we've identified the difference in those, let's talk about the agency. When you're an agent, you can represent buyers, sellers, both. Go ahead and dive in that a little bit and explain the differences between all that.
So the state of Ohio has their four agencies, 4 different ways we can represent. So the first is a simple buyer's agent. You call me, you want to go look at houses, great, or you got my sign. However, my cousin gave me a referral, whatever it is. I'm taking that person around. I'm operating in the buyer's interest, so I am a buyer's agent. Conversely, I could be a seller's agent or the listing agent, and that is someone has a home to sell, they come to me, I go through the listing presentation, we agree upon price, commissions, and all those things, and I list the house as the listing agent. Now, the last two, kind of where it gets dicey, and one is dual agency. I don't act as a dual agent ever. A lot of brokerages don't allow their agents to act as a dual agent because there's some extended liability. What happens is we're saying we can operate in the best interest of both clients, and a lot of brokers say kind of not possible. And I won't get into the dynamics of why that thought process is, but for me personally, I'll say if you have a house for sale for $100,000 and you say, but Sam, I'd take 90 if I could just get it out the door, and you said, I love this house and I'd give you 100, and I'm representing both parties in their best interest, it's impossible. I have to pick one or the other or hurt you both. So
it's funny you say that because I've always thought that too. You deal with agents knowing the same thing about who you really represent, like whose best interest. Because I know there's something called a net listing in Ohio, and net listing where, hey, Scott, you're selling one of your houses for $20,000. Net listing, you can sell it for anything above and beyond. Just get him his $20,000. Was it really his best interest if you can get him 30 and you're keeping 10? Whose best interest is it?
Right.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous. All of this.
I think the best part of that is a good explanation. And if he's very happy with $20,000 and I happen to get 30, that has to be part of the conversation before we get to the 30, or we're going to have a longer discussion at the end and he's going to be upset.
Exactly. So Scott, you flip a lot of houses.
We do.
Do you use agents for those? Do you list them?
We do multiple things to sell the houses that we rehab. Sometimes we owner finance it. When we owner finance it, we have our own salesperson in-house. That's not a realtor, that's just with us. And then, but a lot of our rehabs, we're listing with agents because the agents are great. They're good exposure to the market for pre-qualified buyers. And we're finding that the amount that they make is well worth, the services that they provide if they're good.
See, I think a takeaway point right now would be that a lot of people want to be the agent if they're an investor because they want to save the 3.5%. And just by what you're saying there, you clearly are qualified enough with 700 deals and all you've done to be a broker. And you're choosing not to be.
Right.
Because basically that percentage that you give them is you're just paying your operations manager. You're paying someone to keep you in compliance and take care of things. Clearly, you could be an agent. I'm pretty certain you could pass the test. How many deals have you done?
Yeah,
3?
And four. We got sold one yesterday.
Yeah, 4 since this show started probably. And you could clearly do this, but you're choosing to say, no, go ahead, take 3.5%, 5%, 6%, because they're providing a service for you. And I think that's a takeaway that when you're choosing this at home that you're thinking, I want to be, don't do it out of the greed, trying to take money out of the agent's pocket or trying to, because you could do anything. You could buy your own house, list your own house, renovate your own house,
Sure.
and it becomes a job.
Yeah, and when you get to guys like Sam who've done like a lot of houses, it's not really just finding the buyer. Finding the buyer is relatively not difficult if you have a nice rehabbed house. It's fixing their financial problems because even though they're quote unquote pre-qualified, there's always hiccups in that financing process.
Sure.
And it's the good agents that get you through those financial hiccups that they got to solve in the stream of getting them to closing. Those are the agents that we go with. So they're not just good agents; they also have a bit of a financial mortgage background, and they can deal with that.
Well, here's the thing: it's not just investors, but there's a special part of investors that I like and hate at the same time. And there's no emotional attachment, and that can be a really good thing in a transaction for someone who could be over emotional. Things happen. Home inspections go south quickly on things that weren't expected. There are hiccups, like you say, mortgage financing, and I mean people with 800 credit scores. There are things that come up, and underwriters are not always our friend. When we're working with someone who's invested emotionally, they will come outside the box with you to work on that. An investor says, I've got to keep moving.
Yeah.
And so they're not as concerned about the other side of the equation. They're keeping moving, and I understand that's a bottom line, that's a business transaction. The problem is the realtor is left holding the bag of emotions when things didn't go right. And some investors can be a lot more easy to deal with. They can make it a little bit easier to do my job when those things happen. I think the other thing about investors is and Scott, we've never worked together, so maybe not you, but the other thing is investors really don't have a lot of loyalty. And there's a reason for it. They look at bottom line, and bottom line tells them where their loyalties lie. But if I work with a family, and I have worked with families where I've sold one family 7 homes, that's loyalty. I can build around that. There are graces that I get from them. Hey, you know what? I'm really busy tomorrow. We can go Saturday. If I've never worked with someone, that's a little bit more difficult of a pill to swallow. Investors are not going to wait till Saturday for you. They don't care what's going on. They're going to keep moving. So that loyalty factor is a big deal too.
So if I hear Sam correctly, Scott, you're disloyal and cold-hearted and emotionless. So what drives you crazy about agents?
But I get the bottom line. I like working with agents, but we find that investors do it too. So everybody's trying to get to the next level. But then you get investors and agents acting as if they're at the next levels of experience, but really they're at the bottom rung. So they want to handle our asset that we just purchased. We've got our money out on it. We've got time into it. And we need to get that money back in motion again by selling it. So you get agents saying, oh yeah, I've done X number of things and I'm this and I'm that. And then you give them a listing and it's like, you get no foot traffic in the door. They just don't do the job. They don't have the connections to make things happen within the new buyer market. Then you put it with another agent, all of a sudden, you've got 20 people going through the door. So that's one issue we have with agents, is just that misrepresentation of their ability and skill level.
Oh my gosh, I think it's for the skill level on agents, and clearly not you, but it was during the real estate crash. I'm going to twitch is thinking about this. But I had this horse farm that I bought, and I really didn't have buyers for it. And the crash and the values were plummeting quickly. Banks were tightening up. It was just terrible. So I'm going to have to list this thing. So I literally sent out these agents, and I got this girl responds back to me, and she's like, yeah, I'm looking for the person that has all the buyers in pocket. Like, you're in the equine community. You know all these people that look for this kind of stuff. This is a slam dunk. And she comes in and tells us, after this big presentation, going, yeah, I think this would be a real challenge I'm really up for. I'm really excited to take this on. I've never really done this before. I think it'd be a real challenge for me. I'm like, it's already a challenge for me. I don't want to hire you to have a challenge. I want someone to say, Rob, this is a walk in the park. And we took a big haircut on it. It was bad.
But she was honest. At least you knew it.
I was another agent on that one.
I think that begs a point, though. There's a fine line between, I have to be truthful, and I think that's the number one thing that we should all be. But the problem with any sales industry is we are all, look at me, I'm number one. And I said, listen, I'm number one driving a white truck on Tuesdays with brown shoes, because everybody's number one somewhere that in their marketing you can find how they're the best this or that. And I think what's also really important is know your limitations. If you wanted me to sell an equine property, I'm going to go to a real estate agent that is well versed there. And there's a problem with the over delivery of, listen, I'm your man. The greatest postcard I ever saw, I got a postcard from a guy who's a brand new agent, and he says, I'm brand new, I'm kind of ugly, and I don't have any listings. I'm hungry. And he sent it out for real. Now, we're laughing, and I think it's great, but maybe that's a little too much honesty, but
I call him.
Listen, he actually it made it on a few websites, probably not in the way he intended, but he got a lot of attention from it, and he's actually still in the business. That was about 8 years ago, and he's still in the business. He does a pretty good business, but there's a line between how do you continue to build a business without inflating and without telling someone that your brand experience builds experience.
Oh,
when you don't have any, how do you get it?
That's like me saying, yeah, I'm a cash buyer. It comes down to closing, and I don't have the cash. I just thought I'd get a deal, and it's easy to flip a deal. You can do it in 3 days on these guru shows. So, but it doesn't happen, and then you get no paycheck because I don't have the cash.
Well, that's not going to happen to me because you're going to give me a proof of funds before we get that far in the game.
Yeah, that's not real hard to manufacture.
Well, sure. We're going to have other discussions after that.
Oh my gosh!
But we get a lot of deals that way because people know that we've been doing it so long that we close no matter what. We don't change our mind. We don't find something that we didn't see before. With those out clauses, it's as is. We've done our inspection. It's cash. It's going to close. So we get deals that just like, hey, we need this thing to close quick, and you can get it at this price. But from your end, I'm sure you've gotten stiffed by, I'm a big cash investor, and then no deal.
I think at the end of the day, what I look for is I just look for everyone's involved in the deal that I'm in, whether it's an investor, an agent, a title company, attorney. Everyone's got to be an A player. I want everybody that has the experience and knows what they're doing. I don't want to carry anyone. It's kind of like being on a sports team. If you're the big A-plus player and rocking it out, you don't want a bunch of slouches supporting you. And that's it. And that's why, there's not... You guys all get along because you're both A players and you do this and you understand it, and probably will end up doing deals after this.
There are times when you don't get along, but you still look for what's the end result. Yeah. And you say that, listen, in a perfect world, if I could pick all superstars, I would, but transactions don't typically come together that way. So I'll be perfectly honest. The best thing I ever did is I hired a personal assistant who was unlicensed. We trained her. We got her licensed our way. And I prefer sometimes when the agent isn't an A agent or the investor isn't an A agent. Give us the reins. We'll take care of it. Mm.
All right. So let's talk MLS for a second. So you don't have access to the MLS.
I do not.
With those door codes. Yes. They're locked away.
So does that drive you nuts with investors that some of them might have access to MLS and they're not agents?
Which part to clarify?
Does it bother you that it feels like MLS is a superpower that only agents should have, and there's a lot of investors that might be running around with access?
It does, and it does for a few reasons. One is it's about the ethics of my profession, not your profession. If I was an investor and you gave me a code, by the way, before I was licensed, that's what I did. I wasn't going to question that you were supposed to be there and you weren't. I might question why I'm paying you, but now that I'm on the other side of that and I pay my MLS dues and I'm involved in the MLS and I'm involved in, the morality or ethic part of it, it does bother me quite a bit that the MLS has become a bastardized system for, what's the point?
Exactly. All right, here's this little takeaway because we're talking about the MLS and everything else, and a shameless plug for Realeflow that produces this is you can actually just go on the phone and look at all the comps right there in the area and see there's so much data available to us now. Where it used to be back in the mid-'90s when we got started, it was really like the research you had to do to figure things out was crazy. And then now it's just right at your fingertips. And you can negotiate with the sellers right there on the spot, showing them, hey, look, the house down the street, there's interior pictures. 3 doors down, sold for $80,000 less than you're asking. Looks the same as yours.
You had to talk to an agent then.
Yeah, talk to agents. Right. God forbid, talk to agents.
But let's flip that for just a second, and those apps are great. And there's, everybody seems to have an app. However, you have to know how to use it. And a lot of sellers, unfortunately, are looking at 7 streets over, which happens to be a completely different school district or happens to be in a different township, even though, there are streets that divide townships, towns, whatever. And so they're like, but the house across the street, understand you're in a different school district. And I deal with that all the time. So those apps can actually be a little bit detrimental. And shameless app for realtors, a realtor should understand those things and can explain those pretty well. So it's great to have the tools, but you need to have the knowledge as well.
I was in an auction one time, and literally this auctioneer standing there, and I'm at a ranch on a main road, and behind it they put in a new development. And he's like, guys, get these numbers up. Those houses right there are selling for $350. I'm like, if you have, I'm like, that is not even remotely even a comp. This thing has caving in basement walls. Right. It's a ranch on a main road. But some guy, he got in somebody's head and just completely overbid on. He paid twice what I was going to pay. Right. I'm like, you think he's buying into what this guy said? Because there has to be some accountability with this sounds bad, but as an agent, you are definitely held more accountable than Scott for like when you're talking about values and talking about
Sure.
different things. I noticed maybe you got the email too the other day. There was an agent said on this one website, said, look, there was a 12% increase last month on this property. Multiply that times 12. This is what it will go up in the next 12. I'm like,
I'll buy it. I'll buy it.
And I go, did you really just put this on here?
I wish I would have seen that. I would love to. I would promote that.
It was. I'll send it to you.
That's a seminar slide.
I screenshot it and sent it to my buddy, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like that is really reaching for how you get the value. I wish it was true.
I do. I see people do math that way. Sometimes they're buyers, sometimes they're sellers, and you have to. Again, it's about educating. And when a realtor does that and lists the property, then when he doesn't get any showings at all, I mean. To go back to one of your points earlier, you talked about real estate agents and the difference between real estate agents and maybe not getting any foot traffic. There are limited things that we can do, and I try to do everything. I bought a Matterport camera. I do everything I can to get SEO drives up as much as I can on any property I list. However, the number one marketing tool that I have is the price, especially with all this data that we have at our fingertips. You can go on 27 different places to find a house. If no one is looking at it and it's on the MLS in this seller's market, there's a pretty good chance that we need to talk about price.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Going back to the comparables and all the data that's out there, Realeflow has a company called FlipComp, and they are basically white labeled MLS, which I'm sure that strikes a nerve with some agents out there. And clearly, the MLS is the most accurate form of comparing properties. But with companies like Zillow out there, that they're basically PFA, the pick from air values, how are you dealing with your clients and getting them off the train of what Zillow's showing them?
Again, it's about education, and so the Zillow Zestimate. I love the Zestimate because it gives me an opportunity to show my client why a real estate agent, a good real estate agent, is worth the value that I feel we are, certainly. Zestimates, I've seen them as inaccurate as 30 to 40%. I think in 2014, Zillow came out with, don't quote me on the year, but I think it was around 2014, Zillow actually came out and talked about how they could be off by a certain amount in certain areas. So they aggregate so much data, and what they don't take into account is what properties have sold maybe that we should throw out. I know when I used to do BPO, so broker price opinions for REO properties. And I know how to aggregate the data to where I have to throw this out or this out. What happens when you have those sites that do it in a fashion, they just cast a really wide net and everything kind of goes in there. So your small swimmers are stuck with your big swimmers, and properties like I talked about earlier that might be on the same side of the street or opposite side of the street in a different township. I can know that as a realtor. I'm able to put that human touch on there and say, hey, these are systems that we're going to eliminate those. So as far as it doesn't bother me, because I will be perfectly honest, there's probably not, and maybe I'll offend some realtors here, but there's probably not a lot of realtors that can do what Zillow does as far as delivering the client a pretty package of houses. Everybody thinks their website is so great, but in reality, people still, my clients, your clients, future clients, past clients, they're all going to Zillow for a lot of that information, whether it's right or wrong.
Wow, my gosh, this is a huge topic, and we could dive into the whole comparable thing like crazy. We're going to have you guys back on another time, because there's just not enough time to go through all of it right now. I mean, I could tell the stories on this myself. I should be a guest on the show talking about my trials and tribulations with Zillow. So anyhow, I really appreciate you guys being on here. And what I'd like you to do is give one takeaway for our audience on why it would be a great idea to become a licensed professional and why it would be a great idea not to become a licensed professional, so they can make an educated decision at home.
Scott, I'll defer to you. You can go first.
Why I think you should be an investor over an agent, because you get a lot of flexibility when you're an investor. So if the market turns and it crashes like it did for us it was 06, 40 houses going through financing, all qualified buyers, every single deal tanked. And then we were stuck with those houses dropped. But being an investor, we were able to adjust to the market, and we just found a different strategy that worked. We started doing rent to owns, owner financing, and different things. For us, I'm not tied to showing houses anybody else's schedule. We really control our time, and it just makes it more fluid. Kind of feel like, as an investor, it's easier for me to build a team. I don't have to find a licensed agent or get somebody to go through agency. I can find somebody that works for me that can do just about anything, that I want to get done, or to delegate out. And I know on big deals, your realtors can make, a little bit of money, but on the investor end, the amount of money that we make per deal is so much greater. So I would definitely want to be on, my end of the stick.
And as far as becoming a licensed realtor, I think it really is what you want. I make, I might surprise you with what I make sometimes. The volume I can do is probably greater than the average real estate investor, especially if you're not getting into a large group of investors, which those always work out well, right? Partners. But I like the fact that being a licensed real estate agent. I'm working in a profession where we do maintain a lot of. Hopefully, we're maintaining and upholding a lot of professional standards. Not to say that investors don't, but I don't know what I'm getting with someone who's unlicensed. I do know what I expect to get, and what the National Association of Realtors expects to get, the Ohio Realtors expects to get from a licensed real estate agent. I like that because there's also repercussions. If someone colors outside those lines and it harms a client, there's avenues that we can recover things. I have seen investors that have done things, you said earlier how easy it was to manufacture a proof of funds. I don't even think about things in that aspect, because I know if a real estate agent that's licensed did that, we have a completely different scenario. So I like regimen. I have a military background. I like rules. I enjoy rules. And I know that having the fluidity that you mentioned is great, and I enjoy that, but within reason. And I think that my profession gives me so much opportunity. Yes, scheduling showings, going on listing appointments, but I have learned how to do that within my own parameters and my own standards, so I'm doing it in a fashion that I still get to serve my family, myself, and do things that I want to do, and I'm not just, booking appointments at whenever, willy-nilly. So
I'll tell you what, that is so well put from both of you guys, because I know how you feel about, yes, we can make so much more money as investors, and I definitely know the volume that I miss out on by not being an agent. I think about that constantly, because you can just burn through listings and sales and really crank it up. And it's like, I have thought about being an agent many times because of the volume, because we always have to hunt for that next deal and try to put things together. So, do you have any issues with an investor that becomes an agent?
No, not at all. You mean while they're still investing?
Yes.
No, not at all. I think that they bring a good aspect. And here's the thing about any industry. I think that when you have people that have different backgrounds and diversity, it only brings better to the industry.
We always like to wrap up with talking about freedom. In the freedom. So what freedoms has being in the real estate business given you?
Well, I'm raising 3 sons. My wife and I, we like to do things based on our schedule and what's best for our kids. I was a Cleveland fireman for 17 years, and I missed a lot of baseball games, and I missed a lot of concerts. And now I have the freedom to choose what's important, what standards do I have in place. And when you can live with standards, which my industry, the way I built my business has allowed me to do, I don't miss baseball games. I don't miss concerts. I might miss a grocery shopping tour, but there's a choice behind all of that. And being a licensed real estate agent in the state of Ohio, in the market that I've built for myself, has been really freeing.
Love it. Scott?
Yeah, that's great. Most agents don't get to the status that you do. They're running around Saturday, Sunday, whenever somebody calls. On my end, same thing. I don't miss games. I don't miss kids' stuff. I got 6 kids, coaching varsity basketball at the kids' high school, and just involved, in that way. So I don't have all the time to work. I want to do other things too. For me, being an investor, really, that lifestyle is really promoted by being an investor, because I can get other people to do stuff that needs to get done, that I don't want to do or don't have time to do. But then also that even if I don't have time to work or I choose not to, we still have rental income coming in, because we get multiple streams of income from lending private money, from having rentals. So I don't necessarily, quote unquote, have to work, and I still have income coming in. So being an investor, the whole package is, it just suits what I want.
So, guys, thanks so much for being on the show. I think I'm going to have you both back because we have to dive deeper into some of this stuff. You've been watching the Real Estate Investors Roundtable. I'm your host, Rob the House Guy. And remember, nothing works unless you do.